Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I am your friendly neighborhood trans guy, and I have been on testosterone for 6 years and transitioning for about 10. And throughout my transition, I've gotten a lot of questions. And I mean a lot of questions. Like, what does testosterone do? How did you know you were trans? What made you figure it out? What's in your pants? Which, don't ask people that. Just don't. So I want to answer some cis people's burning questions about trans people today. And I turned to none other than Reddit to find these questions. So for our first question, does it change your sexual preference? For example, if you were a man attracted to a woman, does transitioning into a woman make you attracted to men? Or do you stay attracted to women and become a lesbian? So this is kind of a nuanced question. It can be really different for everybody who does transition. For me personally, testosterone, kind of made me gay. My attraction for men became significantly greater when I was on hormones for probably like the 6 to 12 month range. I really started to have a preference for men, and I identified as bisexual before I was on testosterone, but now I'm I don't even know if the bi part is in there. There are women, but my preference is heavily turned towards men, so it can change your sexuality. Alright, on to our next question. How difficult as an adult over 18 is it to get HRT? This depends on the type of facility that you go to. For me personally, I went to facilities that are informed consent, so what that means is they tell you all about the effects of testosterone, the positive effects, the negative effects, potential side effects, and you are evaluated by a mental health professional. Basically asks if this is your choice, you're not being forced to go on hormones by anybody else, and they assess how long you've been living as the correct gender. They assess if you had any surgeries done or done any other level of transitioning, and from there you are taught how to inject your hormones and have further discussions with the doctors about any potential side effects, and you were on your way. So for me, the process wasn't super long or hard, but there are some places where you have to be in therapy for a specific amount of time and have letters written by mental health professionals, so it can vary depending on the place you're in and also the state you're in, because unfortunately some states are trying to get rid of hormone therapy in general. So it depends on the state you're in and the type of facility you're going to. Cis declaration of pronouns on social media / emails. Is it useful? Yes, it can be really useful. The whole point of pronouns on social media or in an email or in a social media bio is normalization of pronouns. Pronouns have always kind of been a taboo conversation outside of the trans and LGBTQ plus community, so cis people having their pronouns in their bio or in emails kind of just normalizes it. And now you're not putting a target on your back if you have pronouns in your bio. You're not immediately outing yourself as trans if you have your pronouns in your bio. So it really is just about making it a more normal thing. And adding pronouns to social media or an email can also kind of signify that you could be an ally to the community. Because I know for me personally, when I see someone who has pronouns in their bio or in an email sign off, I feel instantly more comfortable, because that shows me that they are willing to present their allyship, and they're willing to show their allyship in a way that's just normal. It's not performative or a huge show, it's just normal everyday life kind of allyship. Why do some of you vote for or support Republicans? Couldn't tell you. What is something you regret after transitioning? Definitely the fact that I have to use the men's bathroom now. That is the most vile, heinous, ungodly place that I've ever been to in every men's bathroom. I don't care where, unless you're at a Buc-ee's. I don't know if y'all who live in places other than the South have been to a Buc-ee's. They have the nicest bathrooms I've ever seen. I can't speak for the women's bathroom, but men's bathrooms, incredibly clean. But every other place that I've been to on the face of this planet has a disgusting men's bathroom. So that is the one thing I regret. The fact that I have to now use a men's bathroom. So men, do better. But on a more serious note, the only thing I really regret is not starting sooner. I waited a year after I turned 18, so I was 19 when I started hormones, because I was in college and I was dealing with a lot of change, and I was still in that weird phase with my family where they were kind of accepting, but it was still kind of an elephant in the room type topic. So there was just a lot going on, and I wanted to start when I turned 18 and went off to college, but I waited about a year. So I also regret not starting sooner. Because if I started sooner, I probably would have grown 2 inches instead of 1. Do you think if you had a good childhood, you'd still be trans? Yes. I did have a pretty good childhood. So yes, despite popular opinion, you could still be trans, even if you had a good childhood. How did you find out or realize? So I started to realize I was trans when I started to go through puberty. And I was always the type of person who hung out with boys more and was into more boyish things and just didn't really like anything feminine, which that makes sense now, but I didn't know I was trans at the time. And I just had this general discomfort that I really couldn't put my finger on. And I kind of chalked it up to just being a very butch lesbian at the time, because I did identify as a lesbian at the time. So I kind of just chalked it up to being that, and I told myself that it was normal for people who wanted to be more masculine, and I kind of put it to bed for a couple of years. So this discomfort kind of just started to grow and grow even more. And it got to the point where I was literally like in my bed at night praying to God that I would wake up as a boy. And I would literally cry myself to sleep praying for that to happen. And it just never did. So to make a long story short, I knew when my discomfort for being a girl and going through puberty just continued to grow and grow and grow and grow. And I just knew something was not aligned there. Can you show me your tits? Well, funny story about that. Does birthing people / menstruator really make you feel more included? It just feels icky to me. It makes it sound like having babies is all AFAB people are good for. For me personally, I don't really like either of these terms. I also agree that it makes it sound like AFAB people are just birthing machines or menstruating machines, and that's all their purpose is. And I think a lot of this is just inclusivity done in a really strange way. For me personally, if there is a issue that is labeled as a woman's health issue, I have no problem grouping myself in with that, because I know that even though I'm a dude, there are some issues that mainly affect women that still affect me. Like, I've not had a hysterectomy, so abortion rights still affect me. And being on testosterone has stopped menstruation, but if I still menstruated, that would still affect me. But I don't have a problem with people just saying it's a woman's issue, because the majority of people who are affected are women. And to me, inclusivity really isn't changing dialect so much as it is the idea of inclusivity. And what that means to me is normalizing the fact that trans men also menstruate and can give birth and have uteruses and are affected by abortion rights. To me, it's focusing on the majority of people that are affected, but also talking about the minority of people that are affected. And it's not excluding trans people from these conversations, and it's not excluding anybody who has a uterus from these types of conversations. It's all about just treating everybody like they're people and being normal about it. Like, yes, some men have uteruses, some don't. Some women do, some don't. There are non-binary people in this world. Okay, cool. Next question. What questions do you wish people would stop asking you? I think the biggest one is for people to stop asking what's in trans people's pants. I thankfully have not gotten a lot of disrespectful questions like that, but that's one I see far too often, and it's just strange. It's just weird. Please don't do that to anyone. Cis, trans, just don't do that. I also don't love questions about if you've gotten the surgery and what was your name before. I don't really hate them because I just don't answer them, but they're also just odd questions to ask people. I personally don't answer the question of what my name was before, and in terms of the surgery, that's a very broad question, because there are a lot of surgeries you can give as a trans person. But most of the time, I'm really open to questions, even if they are invasive, as long as they're actually coming from a place of curiosity and not just you being disrespectful. Because that's really the way to go about this. Like, for all the cis people watching this, the right way to go about this is coming from a genuine place of curiosity and not just you being an invasive weirdo. After transitioning, can trans people reproduce normally? So it's possible for some people. Being on hormones can affect your ability to reproduce, but it is possible. And we've definitely seen in the news the big sensationalized stories about a pregnant man. So yes, trans people can reproduce normally. It just depends on things like how hormones have affected their reproductive systems, and if they still even have reproductive organs. Because some trans men get hysterectomies, and some trans women get bottom surgery. So it all just depends on what steps that person has taken in their transition and how hormones have affected their ability to reproduce. If gender roles didn't exist and men and women were actually treated equally, would all trans people still be trans? What about non-binary? How much of it is wanting it to be physically different, and how much of it is not identifying with the gender role? So this is a great question. Gender roles really don't have as much of a role in somebody's transition as we think it does. Of course, there is a societal normal for what a man looks like and a woman looks like. We can't deny that. That's just what it is. But for me personally, I transitioned so that I could be comfortable with myself, and so that I could have a body that is comfortable for what I want, and so I could have a voice that is what I want, and so that I could look at myself and see what I want in the mirror. Of course, a part of transitioning is being perceived by society and others by the person you actually are. But transitioning is really an internal thing. It's really about how you're comfortable, what you're most comfortable with, what you want your body to look like. So to me, transitioning really isn't about society. It's more so about there's a misalignment with how my body looks and what my brain is, and I want to fix it. That's the biggest thing it's ever been for me. So gender roles be damned, trans people would still be trans, even if gender roles didn't exist. A lot of us defy gender roles when we transition, so yes, we would all still be trans.
So I'm editing right now, but I just wanted to add to this question, the fact that most trans people do try and defy gender roles before we transition. Like, I was a very, very, very masculine woman before I even knew I was trans. And there was still something missing, and there was still a void in me, and there was still something that just wasn't right. So even when we are defying gender roles as trans people, because we are trans, there is still something there that doesn't quite fit. So yeah, that just also solidifies the answer that if gender roles weren't a thing, we all still would be trans.
Is there any part of you that is genuinely worried that it is just a phase? I've had my little moments of doubt and my little moments of being scared about that, but I've never genuinely thought that it was a phase, and I've never genuinely been worried that it was a phase. I've always had the feeling that this is right for me, and that I know who I am, and that I'm very solid in my identity. So, of course, I'm not perfect, so I've had little moments of like, oh, am I sure? But it's never been like a genuine, real concern or worry for me. Because I've felt infinitely more comfortable being a man than I ever was a woman, and I have felt so much joy in my transition, and I felt so much happiness, and that just is a reminder to me that I know exactly who I am, no matter what, and that I'm on the right path. Do you ever miss being the gender you were before? Not even a little bit. I would ask, is it offensive when others refer to you as a trans woman or trans man rather than a woman or man? It really depends on the context for this. In normal settings, where I'm not sure if it's safe to have it known that I'm trans, I don't love when people make it a point to call me trans, just for my own safety. I'm very proud of my identity. I'm not very quiet about it a lot of the time. So yeah, I don't have a problem with people denoting that I'm trans. But, I mean, I'm fine either way. You can call me a trans guy, you can call me a guy. It doesn't really matter to me. But this also just depends on the person and the environment and a lot of other external factors. Is it possible for a person to have an orgasm after reassignment surgery? Not a doctor, but my understanding of the process is creating the genitalia, which seem to make that prospect incredibly dim. The sheer number of nerve endings in the clitoris and the tip of the penis make it seem impossible enough to survive the surgery to provide the same sensations. I personally have not had bottom surgery, but I've done a good bit of research on it. And from what I've heard, it is very possible for feeling to return to those areas and for orgasm to be possible. As far as I know, it's easier for a trans woman to experience feeling down there again and to be able to orgasm than it is for a trans man, but it is still highly possible for a trans man. Of course, there are outliers in that, and there are some people who don't really get feeling back there. But it all depends on the person, how it's done, where the skin graft is taken, things like that. There's many different factors that can contribute to it. Do non-binary people or people who are gender fluid count as trans, even if they still mostly present as their assigned gender at birth with no intent to change? This really depends on the person. Some non-binary people do consider themselves trans, some consider themselves a specific group outside of being trans. It really just depends on the person. And it all depends on kind of where they lie on the non-binary scale, because even if some people present as one way, they might more so align their gender with another. So it really depends on the person and what they are most comfortable with. Would you rather your gender and sex match but everyone misgenders you no matter what, or your gender and sex will never match and you can't take steps to change that, but everyone genders you correctly? I would definitely go with the first option. What everyone else has to say, be damned. Because if my gender and my sex matched, I would feel infinitely more comfortable in my body, and I would feel myself. And I would know who I am, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if people misgender me all day long. I'm still myself, no matter what anybody has to say about it. I'm a lesbian, but is it rude for me to say I wouldn't be sexually intimate with a trans woman if she hasn't had bottom surgery? Being trans isn't the issue, but I do not want a penis anywhere in or near me in that context. That's not rude at all. As long as you are not using that as a reason to be transphobic, which you obviously aren't because you said being trans isn't the issue, that's not transphobic whatsoever. Genital preference and repulsion is a thing in cis people and trans people. So that is not transphobic whatsoever. You are allowed to have your preferences, and you are allowed to not want a certain body part on your partner. That's perfectly okay. The only issue that ever really comes up with this stuff is when people use it as an excuse to be transphobic. Because preferences don't make you transphobic. Being transphobic makes you transphobic. Is there an emotionally safe way to tell your LGBTQ child you are scared about them being open because of the very real threat of violence without making them feel you are ashamed of them? A friend of mine has a little boy who is wearing women's clothing and beginning to build up to talking about their pronouns and wants to have long hair and nails, etc. And he is so worried about how the kids will treat them at school. Kind of like, is there a safe way to convey the desire to hide or be less obvious for safety, not because they should be ashamed? Is it even worth it? That kind of advice. I think the most important thing is being transparent with this child and being very clear about the conversation that is being had and being very clear about your concern. And not discouraging them for being themselves. I think it's a very normal conversation to have with LGBTQ kids that, hey, there are going to be people out there who don't like you. There are going to be people out there who are hateful. Unfortunately, that's just the world we live in. And it should boil down to, I want you to be safe. I want you to be smart. And I think you should still let that child have the liberty to be themselves and express themselves in a way that they see as fit. I think there needs to be conversations around things like, hey, do you feel comfortable enough to talk about your pronouns in this situation? Do you feel comfortable enough to dress this way in this situation? And so on and so forth. And so just being really open and honest about the state of the world and the world we live in, and just being clear and concise with them and letting them know, hey, I love you, accept you, I want you to be yourself, but also please be careful. All right, folks, this is our final burning question from cis people. How do I know you're not just a bunch of rats in a trench coat? Well, there you have it, folks. We've just answered cis people's most burning questions for trans people. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions for me that you'd like me to answer in later videos, please feel free to leave them in the comments, because if y'all like this, I might make it a series, because this is kind of fun. This is kind of fun, I won't lie. All I ask is that you don't ask any fucking weird questions. Just please don't. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you like my videos, please feel free to drop a subscription, or a like, or a comment, anything you want, because I will continue to bring you only the best LGBTQ+ content on the internet, ever. Statistically proven by me. And if you want to hang out with me elsewhere, I also have a Twitch and a Twitter and a TikTok, which will all be linked in the description below. Thank you all once again for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!